Hey there guys, what's going on? Tyler here with your movie fix. It's been a long time since I've said that. It's probably been a long time since you've heard it. But I finally feel like there's actually something to talk about right now. So this weekend, Zack Snyder had a director's cut event where he showed Dawn of the Dead, Watchmen, and Batman v Superman. All the director's cuts versions, showed them on the big screen with an audience of like 400. They spent like 3 days together. There were cast and crew interviews, Q&As. A big dream for all the Zack Snyder fans. This was affectionately called SnyderCon, which was pretty funny. But we got some news about Justice League, right? About his cut, what's going on with it. So that's what I want to talk about. What he said was actually in it, what we were missing, some of the controversy. And then I also want to talk about what's the actual status of it. What's the likelihood and the reality of what happened with Justice League? What's the reality that we get to see it, right? So what he talked about that we were missing from it. And just to preface this, the Justice League that he shot was rewrote. That he wrote it. Him and Chris Terrio already redid it because they had finished their original script before Dawn of Justice came out, right? So when they shopped that to the studio, after the reaction of Batman v Superman, he mentioned that they were all pretty insecure about it, you know, with just what the reaction was, and that maybe some of their ideas and what they used was a little too crazy. It was a little too out there. And that they didn't get to do the scary story, the hard part of that story that they wanted to do. But this what he did, what he shot, was still his approved version, his reshot version. That's my puppy there, sorry. So she's kind of trying to interrupt me. But it's a compromised version, but it's still his. It's still what they made. So it was what was going to be in theaters, right? So Joss had further rewritten it into what we got, right? But what we missed out on, he explained some of the time travel stuff, the nightmare reality, what was going on with that, because it was brought up during the BVS Q&A, because somebody was finally brave enough to ask, you know, what happened, what was going to happen, you know, and it was fair. I can understand why some people were maybe a little hesitant to ask about Justice League during a BVS event, because you don't want to just steal the thunder of questions, but it's fair, right? Because there were plot lines placed in Dawn of Justice and even Man of Steel that were supposed to be paid off, right? And everybody wants to know. Everybody wants to know. That was the huge elephant in the room, you know, Justice League. And obviously everyone's been clamoring for a director's cut of that. So he talked about what they had shot for Justice League, or what the idea was, with Flash coming through and talking to Bruce in the cave. And he said that that was a mistake, that they, in the future, they had 2 windows to go through and prevent something. And they had come up with some, you know, it's movie logic time travel, right? They had to come up with some sort of device for how to make it work. And in his version, Cyborg and Batman and Flash were all working together. And the science of it was that they only had 2 opportunities to go to the right place. And the rotation of the Earth has to be in the same relative location for them to go to that spot, or else it won't work, right? Or they'll just end up in space or die or something. There was a reasoning for urgency or for failure. You know what I'm saying? So he's talking about how Batman carries around a half-torn cyborg with him. He's got just his torso that he carries with him. It's like Chewbacca and C-3PO. As they're trying to work for a way to fix the past. And that there's 2 windows that they can send Flash through to fix everything, to fix that nightmare reality, right? And he says that that was the one that we saw in Dawn of Justice it was a mistake. It was the wrong one. They sent Barry through the wrong window and it was too soon. They went to the right place. He was trying to go to the Batcave, but he went to the wrong time. Right, so Batman is talking to Cyborg and asking him, like, if you had to choose, or if you didn't have to ask me, which one would you send me through? And he says, that one. He says, pick the other one because the one that you sent me through was wrong. And he already knew it was wrong because he met Flash already. So he was meant to send him through the other point in time, which would land him into the Batcave and prevent Darkseid from killing Lois. And that was like the big bomb, right? He dropped that on everybody and they lost their minds. And then they only had time for one more question after that. And I don't know if you heard about this, but the guy that asked the final question after hearing him go on about Justice League, and he was starting to open up about it. This guy asks about the football uniforms in Dawn of Justice, like, way to drop the ball. Everybody was so mad at this guy because it was just so irrelevant to what he was talking about. And we were getting some real meaty details. And this guy asked about football uniforms. It was just crazy. But yeah, he talked about Darkseid and Superman succumbing to the anti-life equation. And that's what we saw. We got a taste of it. And so like his second movie in Justice League was to deal with that. That was probably in the original big story that he had in mind, that they would be dealing with the future timeline and preventing that from happening, right? So about the status of the actual cut and the likelihood of it being released, people had even asked him, you know, hey, so after the Q&A, you could go up and you could get things signed. And a lot of people took that as their opportunity to just flat out ask him about his Justice League, because they didn't get the answers they wanted. And he seemed pretty open about talking about it. And he was. So people were asking him, you know, hey, how long was your movie supposed to be? And on the t-shirts for the event, it's got like this hybrid of a zombie, Dr. Manhattan, Batman, and Superman. And he circles something on the cape. He's like, right there. And on the cape, there was like a number hidden right in front of everybody, and it says 2:14. He said that's how long it was. 214 minutes, 3.5 hours. That's what he said. That's what it was. That is from him himself. And someone else had asked him, and he said that he had about 10 different versions of the movie, but the one definitive, his version that he says is the story, was 3.5 hours long, right? And that movie, and somebody asked him, you know, how far along were you? And it really just needs some visual effects and a score, a music. That's all it needs. It needs some visual effects and music. They were working on that with Zack up until March of April, so that'd be about 6 months out before release. That movie was really far along. Really far along. That just needs polishing on the effects, because he talks about the way that he does his movies and how visual he is with the concept art and storyboarding, and how soon he likes to get the ball rolling on visual effects. And that by the time they start cutting his movie together and editing it, so much of the visual effects are already done that there's not always a whole lot left to do. So that movie was way farther along than we had thought. And that's kind of big news, because you remember that hit piece put out by the Wall Street Journal last year during Comic-Con? Because that's what it was. We were supposed to get the answer. We were going to get a final definitive answer from the studio about whether or not Zack's Justice League exists. And the article wouldn't list any names. It was just my sources. This person said that. Oh my God, dog, you were killing me. And it was nothing. It was a big nothing. And it was a big lie to say that, oh, it doesn't exist. It wasn't very far along. We know that's a lie. Everybody knew it when it came out. And now we have confirmation from Zack himself that, yep, it's 3.5 hours. It's mostly done. He said that he doesn't know that they have any plans currently to release it, but, and this was real hopeful, he said that they are very aware of the tremendous pressure from the fans. They know that people are asking for that movie. And another important thing is that Kevin Tsuchihara, he's the guy that rushed Justice League, and that it had to be 2 hours. They had to meet that original release date, and he's gone. He was the one that was responsible for that, and Zack even told them that, like, the decision makers who did that, they're pretty much all gone. So you guys need to keep asking for it, and that's a lot of precedence to know that it's a 3.5 hour movie. That's an entirely different movie. Those are entirely different performances from Ben, from Henry, from Ray, everyone, right? That's the movie they worked so hard for. And we've been hearing it from Ray Fisher and Jason and all of them that, like, fuck yeah, we want to see it. That's the one that we worked so hard on. And we now have confirmation, from Zack that it's real and it's pretty much almost done. They would make their money back on Blu-ray sales easily. And why I think this can actually happen is, one, there's no time crunch on it, right? There's no release date that this is going to be out by whenever, because it's just going to be straight to home. right? It's going to be on Blu-ray, 4K, whatever. This doesn't need a theatrical release. If you're clamoring for a theatrical release of this movie, you're asking for too much. If you're asking for Zack to come back and finish his Justice League, to come back and do Man of Steel, you're asking for too much. That's not going to happen. What is likely going to happen is we get like an anniversary edition of Justice League, a 5 or 10 year anniversary edition, or it's going to be the alternate cut, something like that, an anniversary box set of Man of Steel, Dawn of Justice, and Justice League. That's more likely reality. And the fact that, yeah, it's not on a time crunch, it wouldn't take as much to pay because of that. On top of, they'd make their money back on Blu-ray sales pretty easily. They waste far more money on animated movies getting theatrical releases, like their animated Batman movies and stuff. Not Lego Batman, but like the drawn ones. They waste way more money on those that don't make their investments back, or just barely do. So to know that there's an actual, live action Justice League movie sitting in a vault, in a digital vault somewhere, that's bullshit. I mean, and he knows that they're aware and that we need to keep asking for it. And I think that's pretty important because this is the most definitive answer that we've gotten out of him. It's straight from the source that if we want it to happen, when you get the choice, keep trying to make it happen. That means the mentions on social media, the hashtags. Chris Wong Swenson, great guy, great channel. He's kept up with the conspiracy of Zack's Justice League for a long time now. And they did a snail mail campaign, which is where you mail in a letter, write an actual physical letter like they did to get the Donner cut of Superman released, Superman 2. And that worked. And I think he's planning on getting another one of those for whenever we figure out who the new CEO of Warner Brothers is, because that's the problem. That currently there's not a whole lot we can do because there's nobody, there making that decision on who would make that call. So we can hope that with Kevin out, with the older regime out, they're gone, that we can get some people in there who care more about the artistic integrity. That's our best case hope, that we get somebody in there who would care to be like, spend $30 million to get this movie out there, live action Justice League, a better percentage of a return. There's a more likelihood that we're going to make some money back on this. Yeah. Or even if not, just something to respect the directors, because I've read enough stuff about other directors and writers kind of shying away from wanting to work with Warner Brothers, especially on DC properties, because of how they treat it, how hands-on how those producers want to be. And to do something like that for Justice League would go a long way, right? And you got movies like Blade Runner that made nothing. Blade Runner made no money when it came out, and they still cared to make 5 different Blu-ray versions of that movie. They cared that somebody cared enough about a movie that made no money, that critics hated, that they did reshoots for that movie like 30 years after the fact, or 20 years reshoots for that movie to edit in to Blade Runner so that Ridley Scott could complete his vision, right? It's kind of like George Lucas, for better or worse, going back and getting to do the fixes that he wanted for Star Wars. That's different because he owned his own film studio. I get it. But imagine having that kind of creative freedom as a director. M. Night Shyamalan, we know he did Avatar and After Earth and stuff like that. He gave up on that whole big studio movie thing after those. And I believe Split and Glass. He made those movies on his own. He did that without any studio. He did that all himself, made the movie how he wanted to, and then he sold them to the studios to release it. That way nothing can be changed. I don't think that can happen with Zack's Justice League, but we got to ask. We got to keep asking for it, right? We got to keep the pressure on the studio, because this is a pretty big deal for fans. Because if the movie ultimately ends in the same place in his revised version of Justice League, his version, it still ends in the same place of where Joss's did. So there's really nothing to lose here. I'm curious, what do you guys make of it? What do you guys make of what he said about the nightmare scene? My dog is bumping her head on the table. What do you guys make of the nightmare scene, the possibility of what his Justice League was going to be, and your thoughts on what he says is the actual status of it, that it's 3.5 hours long and it's almost done? I'd love to know. Comment below. and I'll see you guys on the next video.